Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. As hard as it is to believe, we're already more than 3 months into 2025. And if you've been tuning into the channel for a while now, you know that can only mean one thing. It's time for another edition of Dumbest Criminals, our quarterly recurring series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals and crime stories we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered these stories. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comments section below, as well as keep an eye out for a similar one at the end of the week where we'll be covering stories exclusively from our Crimes of the Week International series. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Authorities in Osceola County, Florida say that a 22-year-old pizza delivery driver is facing multiple serious charges following an unhinged and terrifying attack against another woman in her family, one that she allegedly carried out because she was angry over a tip she had received on the victim's order. The whole thing began at around 10 p.m. on December 22nd, 2024, when the victim, 26-year-old Melinda Irizarry, ordered from a local pizza shop in the city of Kissimmee. Melinda, her husband, and their 5-year-old daughter had gone to a motel that night as part of a celebration for her husband's birthday. When the family's pizza order was delivered that night, the driver, 22-year-old Brianna Alvello, informed them that the total was just over $33. Melinda handed Alvello a $50 bill and was expecting change, only for Alvello to immediately begin walking away. When Melinda spoke up about the confusion, Alvello reportedly claimed that she wasn't responsible for giving change. Melinda then asked for the money back and searched around before paying with smaller bills, leaving Alvello with a $2 tip. The 22-year-old reportedly rolled her eyes but walked away without saying anything. It seemed like that was the end of things, until about 90 minutes later. That's when Melinda and her family were startled by loud banging at the door of their motel room. When Melinda opened up to see what was going on, 2 masked intruders reportedly forced their way in. The male suspect held them at gunpoint and ordered Melinda's husband into the bathroom. At the same time, the female suspect rummaged through Melinda's purse and destroyed several of her and her family's belongings, including her young daughter's Nintendo Switch. The female intruder then pulled out a knife and stabbed Melinda at least 14 times before both suspects fled the scene. Melinda was rushed to a hospital after the incident and thankfully is said to be in stable condition. However, she suffered a ruptured lung as a result of the attack, and making matters worse, she had just learned she was several weeks pregnant. After launching an investigation, authorities were apparently able to link the crime to the pizza delivery earlier that evening, and Brianna Alvello was arrested. Upon finishing her shift that night, she allegedly clocked out of work and then went to terrorize Melinda and her family because she was furious over the situation with the tip. Alvello has now been charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and home invasion with a firearm. So far, her alleged male accomplice has not been identified. Authorities in St. Lucie County, Florida say that they encountered quite the interesting situation last week when they pulled over a suspected DUI driver only to be given a bizarre explanation by his passenger. The whole thing started shortly after 1 a.m. on December 27th when a St. Lucie County deputy noticed a silver Ford pickup truck driving erratically near the city of Stewart. The deputy followed the vehicle a short distance, deciding to pull the driver over after he saw the truck almost hit the curb several times. Upon approaching the driver's side window, the deputy immediately smelled alcohol and was pretty sure he knew what was going on. However, that's when the female passenger unexpectedly spoke up. The woman, later identified as 48-year-old Diane Dash, stated that her boyfriend, 53-year-old Ronnie White, wasn't actually intoxicated. Instead, she claimed the whole thing was her fault because she had been distracting him. In her words, quote, "It's my birthday and I was rubbing all over him to try to get him excited." The deputy asked if there was anything else going on in addition to the roadway rubbing, to which White and Dash both claimed there was not. However, the excuse quickly fell apart once White was asked to perform some field sobriety tests. He failed them all miserably, refused to take a breath test, and was promptly arrested for driving under the influence.
Representatives from the LAPD say that an accused thief didn't quite think through his escape plan this week after he attempted to flee the scene of a robbery in an autonomous vehicle. but apparently never considered that the car might have built-in safety features. According to reports, the whole thing started just before 8:30 p.m. on January 6th when the male suspect, who so far has not been identified by name, went into a Ralph's grocery store at the intersection of West 3rd Street and La Brea Avenue. The exact details of what happened inside have not been revealed, though what we do know is that police received a 911 call minutes later stating that a man had robbed the business and attacked security guards. One of the guards was allegedly doused with pepper spray when they attempted to stop the suspect from fleeing the scene. However, authorities caught a lucky break when they learned how the man had made his escape. They were told he had been seen hopping into a Waymo driverless taxi. While the suspect likely thought the vehicle was pretty convenient, what he apparently didn't know is that Waymos make terrible getaway cars. You see, they're programmed to pull over when they hear sirens or detect emergency lights. This is precisely what happened when officers located the vehicle not long after, just 3 miles from the crime scene. The suspect was quickly taken into custody. As funny as this all is, apparently, the suspect in this case is far from the only person who doesn't understand how these vehicles work. Just days earlier, another man learned the hard way after he allegedly tried to jump into the driver's seat of a Waymo while drunk and steal the car. In case you're wondering, that also went about as well as you would think. Authorities in California say that a man barely made it into 2025 before finding himself behind bars after he was pulled over for suspected drunk driving and accidentally said the quiet part out loud while being questioned by police. It all started at around 12:40 a.m. on January 1st when officers with the Murrieta Police Department noticed a car driving erratically. They decided to pull over the driver and question him about whether he'd been drinking. Things didn't get very far before this priceless interaction.
Hi. Hi. My name is Officer Bridgewater, Murrieta Police Department. Today you're being stopped for a DUI investigation. Do you have your license on you?
I do.
Okay. Where are you coming from?
I was just dropping off my friend because I'm the DUI tonight, and I was dropping her off near the In-N-Out off of Temecula. Okay. And now I'm heading my way back off of, Jefferson.
You're the DUI tonight?
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say the DD?
If that epic Freudian slip wasn't enough to confirm officers' suspicions, what happened next certainly was.
I had a beer and some champagne a couple hours ago, but...
Though the driver claimed he'd only had a bit of beer and champagne a couple hours earlier, when asked to take part in some field sobriety tests, he nearly fell over multiple times.
1, 2, 3. You're good, just continue. 9. That's good. Keep your foot out in front of you, okay?
As you might imagine, the whole thing ended up in the man being arrested. So in fact, he was the DUI that night. The Murrieta Police Department posted the body cam footage to their Instagram page this week, where they also reminded the public to drink responsibly. So far, the suspect's name has not been released. Representatives from Florida's Polk County Sheriff's Office are asking for the public's help in identifying a pair of suspects this week following an equally strange and stomach-churning case of retail theft that took place in the middle of last month. According to a post released by the Sheriff's Office on social media, the whole thing began around noon on December 18th when the male and female suspect walked into a Family Dollar store in the city of Mulberry. Once inside, they quickly began filling up a cart full of items. However, they weren't intending on buying anything. Instead, the female suspect walked to an area of the store where she would be seen by customers and employees. That's when she proceeded to make quite the spectacle of herself. There's no point sugarcoating what happened next, so I'm just going to say it. She shit on the floor. As disgusting as this was, the whole thing was intended to be a distraction, and it was definitely effective. While all eyes were on the female suspect, her male accomplice walked right out of the store with the cart containing $500 worth of stolen goods. Ironically, police say many of the items the couple stole were cleaning supplies. In their post this week, police asked anyone who might have information about the two suspects to please come forward. As their identities are currently unknown, the Polk County Sheriff's Office opted to give them colorful nicknames instead, writing, quote, "If you recognize Mr. Clean or Miss Dookie, or you have information regarding this investigation, please contact Detective Hannon at 863-499-2400 or rhannon@polksheriff.org.
Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a local man was arrested this week following a harebrained and disturbing scheme in which he allegedly tried to use a tracking device to engineer a romantic encounter with a woman who he'd previously been in a brief relationship with. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime this past August when the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Michael Strack, purchased a Cube brand GPS tracker from his local Best Buy. After activating the tracker, he traveled to the home of a girl that he had a brief sexual relationship with as a teenager and secretly attached the device to her car. His plan was to use the location information to stalk the woman, then at some point create what would appear to her to be a chance encounter, which he presumably believed would rekindle their relationship. Unfortunately for Strack, that's not at all what happened. It turned out he wasn't very good at hiding the tracker, and the would-be victim found it not long after. When she did, she called police. After some investigation, authorities were able to obtain the account information related to the GPS device, leading them right to Strack. Needless to say, the victim was not swept off her feet when she learned what was going on. She told police that she'd had, quote, a brief sexual relationship with Strack several years ago, which ended with no further substantial contact. When questioned, the 22-year-old reportedly admitted to everything. He was arrested on January 14th on a felony charge of installing tracking devices or applications and booked into the county jail. Not even rehab facilities are a safe harbor from illegal drugs anymore, apparently, as officials in New York say that a drug counselor was recently busted for selling drugs to undercover officers. According to reports, it all started when authorities in Dutchess County began receiving tips from the public about a man who they said was a local crack dealer. Members from the county's drug task force looked into the situation, and sure enough, the man, later identified as 54-year-old Alvin Lewis, was selling crack cocaine in multiple towns in the area. Police now allege that he would eventually unwittingly make several sales to a number of their undercover officers as well. What made the whole thing particularly galling, though, is what Lewis did for his legitimate work. When he wasn't moonlighting as a crack dealer, the 54-year-old was employed as a counselor at Arms Acres, a local inpatient rehabilitation clinic. On January 14th, Lewis was finally busted after being pulled over by police near his home in Wappingers Falls. A search of his home and vehicle reportedly uncovered an unspecified quantity of crack that was, quote, packed and ready for sale. At the time of this recording, Lewis is now facing felony narcotics charges. Even if he somehow beats the charges, though, I think it's safe to assume he will also need to look for a new job. Officials from a Florida school district have been left embarrassed and doing some serious damage control this week after a local principal and one of their teachers were arrested following a rager of a house party for underage students that they are accused of helping to host and orchestrate. According to reports, the whole thing started on the night of January 19th when authorities began receiving numerous 911 calls about an out-of-control party in the city of Cocoa Beach. Neighbors and concerned residents told police that there were dozens of what appeared to be high school-age students who were drinking, smoking, and engaged in violent and destructive behavior at a residence off of Country Club Road. Officers quickly discovered that the home in question belonged to the principal of nearby Roosevelt Elementary School, 47-year-old Elizabeth Hill Brodigan. They contacted Brodigan, who apparently made it seem like she had no idea what was going on and that she would be shutting everything down. However, over the next couple of hours, police continued to receive calls about the party, and it became clear that things were getting even more out of control. Brevard County Fire Rescue were dispatched to the scene after it was reported that a teenage boy was vomiting uncontrollably and shaking outside of the property, and there were claims that someone had been waving a gun around and pointing it at people inside. A teenage girl was also caught driving while intoxicated and dressed in clothes that reportedly coincided with the house party's white lie theme. When officers and emergency responders arrived to tend to the boy who had suffered the medical episode, they spotted Brodigan, who was clearly at the house and was apparently standing on her driveway. Upon seeing police, though, the 47-year-old principal allegedly went inside and began shutting off the lights. Around this same time, authorities learned that Brodigan wasn't the only school official that was there. A 45-year-old teacher at her school, Carly Anderson, was also in attendance. She reportedly got aggressive with officers and was visibly drunk. According to police, there were more than 100 people at the house when they got there. The full story about what had happened only began to come out a few days later, though, as police began interviewing some of the students that were at the party. They claimed that not only was Brodigan okay with what had happened that night, she had helped to host and organize the gathering, and had provided alcohol to many of the underage partygoers. Additionally, students claimed that parties like this happened once or twice a month. This week, Brodigan and Anderson were both arrested and charged with child neglect and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. They have also been placed on administrative leave until further notice. While nothing has been confirmed about why the women were allegedly involved in planning and throwing these parties for minors, some reports state that Brodigan's son is a high school student. As an amusing side note, Brodigan used to be a teacher herself and had previously won a Teacher of the Year award.
A jilted Florida woman bent on revenge against her ex-husband instead ended up giving them both a different kind of night to remember last week after she was allegedly caught on camera using a commemorative token from their first date together to try and destroy his property. According to reports, it all started shortly before 11 p.m. on January 24th when police were called by the male victim. The man stated his ex-wife, 34-year-old Sabrina Coyne, had shown up at his Bonita Springs home unannounced, had smashed one of his windows, and was banging on the door and demanding to be let in. When officers arrived, they found Coyne still standing at the door. Body cam footage captured part of the resulting exchange between them, in which Coyne insisted that she lived at the home and that her ex-husband wouldn't let her inside.
What's going on? You're the one banging on here?
Yeah, I'm trying to get in touch with my ex-husband.
Were you banging on the doors all along?
I banged on the door because he won't let me in.
You live here or no?
Yes.
Or you used to?
I live here.
Of course, Coyne did not live in this house, but that was apparently one of the smaller lies she told that night. What caught police more off guard was when the 34-year-old repeatedly denied smashing a window at the property. This was despite the fact that not only was she caught on video surveillance doing this, she also recorded footage herself of the crime on her cell phone.
If you cannot afford a lawyer
For what? Wait.
for breaking the window with a
I didn't
brick,
break the window.
we'll speak
I
about
did
that
not
now.
break the window.
Do you want to speak to?
Making things even stranger, the item in question that Coyne allegedly hurled through the window was a brick that was a commemorative token of her and her ex-husband's first date. The brick reportedly had the date from 2020 printed on it, as well as the fact that they were jet skiing. Coyne's repeated denials about launching the brick were also captured on body cam footage, as was her arrest. She is now facing charges of criminal mischief and throwing a deadly missile into an occupied dwelling.
Representatives from the Florida Highway Patrol released the details of a bizarre recent high-speed chase this week, and the only thing more wild than the pursuit itself was what the male suspect was wearing when they finally caught him. According to police, the whole thing began just after midnight on January 27th, when officers with the Highway Patrol spotted the man in question, 36-year-old Dylan Keith Devereaux, driving recklessly and at a high rate of speed in Pasco County. They attempted to pull Devereaux over, but he allegedly refused, leading to a chase. Even after the 36-year-old crashed his truck into a tree, he was apparently still quite a handful. Despite being hit twice with a stun gun, he managed to wriggle his way out during a fight with officers, running off into the woods with a handcuff dangling from one of his wrists. Thanks to the help of a police canine, authorities were able to track Devereaux to a nearby property in the community of Aripeka. The canine's involvement is even more fitting once you know what Devereaux was wearing once he was caught, though police would have to exercise a bit of patience first. When they got to the house, which belonged to Devereaux's girlfriend, she claimed that he wasn't there and didn't want anyone to come in because there were illegal drugs inside. After several more hours, authorities were able to obtain a warrant and they returned to the property. That's where they successfully took Devereaux into custody, who was dressed in a Dalmatian onesie. Unbelievably, his girlfriend, who had earlier admitted to having the drugs, was also arrested because she apparently never bothered to get rid of them. Devereaux, the Dalmatian, is now facing a litany of charges, including fleeing to elude, escaping, reckless driving, leaving the scene involving property damage, battery on a law enforcement officer, assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting an officer with violence, resisting an officer without violence, depriving a law enforcement officer of equipment, drug equipment possession, possession of methamphetamine, and petty larceny. In case you're wondering, reports do not mention whether he was driving 101 miles per hour at the time of the high-speed chase. Representatives from Florida's Polk County Sheriff's Office say that a local woman is facing charges this week following an unhinged attack on a man with a piece of gardening equipment, a crime she allegedly committed because she was angry that he had canceled plans with her. The whole thing started sometime on February 10th when the unidentified victim contacted 47-year-old Melanie Davis and said that he could no longer make their scheduled plans to hang out the following day. It's unclear how that conversation went, but it's unlikely that the man anticipated what would happen next. According to police, Davis responded to the cancellation by driving to the man's house in the city of Frostproof at 3 a.m. Once there, she began shouting at him from outside. When the man came to see what was going on, the 47-year-old allegedly climbed the man's fence, pushed through his door, and started punching him. Apparently not content with this, at some point she reportedly grabbed a garden hoe, which she used to continue the beating. When police were called to the scene, the male victim was taken to the hospital with a serious cut on one of his arms. Davis, meanwhile, was arrested and charged with armed burglary with battery, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, simple battery, and criminal mischief. While this all sounds pretty crazy, apparently Davis has a pretty long track record of similar incidents. The Polk County Sheriff's Office say that she has been arrested by them 27 times, with their interactions with her dating back to 1997, when she was just 19 years old. Just in case you were wondering, that first arrest was also for battery.
Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that an angry young woman's plans to get revenge on an ex-boyfriend backfired spectacularly this week after she was not only caught in the act, but she also ended up making a massive mistake. The whole thing began sometime in the early morning hours of February 26th when Volusia County Police interrupted 18-year-old Evelina Fabianski and a 16-year-old accomplice while they were in the middle of vandalizing a vehicle. The pair of teens were in a residential area of the city of Deltona where they had allegedly covered a black Infiniti sedan with eggs and yellow spray paint. According to reports, the whole thing was part of a revenge plot against Fabianski's ex-boyfriend, who lived on the street in question. I'm going to assume the man's name is Jason, since this was one of the things spray painted onto the vehicle, along with smiley faces and other random words, including devil. Apparently, Fabianski was mad because Jason owed her $700. The thing is, though, Fabianski had made a pretty big mistake. You see, this wasn't Jason's car. The vehicle reportedly belonged to another random resident on the street. If this wasn't bad enough, when police caught Fabianski and her 16-year-old accomplice, they were in possession of a whole bunch of open alcohol and more than 20 grams of marijuana. Since Fabianski was driving, that means that on top of other charges she is now facing, she was also slapped with a DUI. In body cam footage, police seemed genuinely baffled by the teen's stupidity. At one point, an officer tells the suspects, quote, "You really need to try harder and to try to be sneaky because you're god-awful." Authorities in the city of Keene, New Hampshire say that a young woman is facing charges this week following the discovery of a revolting series of crimes in which she allegedly urinated on food products at a local grocery store where she was employed. According to police, the whole thing started on February 14th when they were contacted by a concerned member of the public. The anonymous tipster alerted them to a young woman who seemed to be specializing in a rather unique and stomach-churning form of content creation. In short, she was making videos of herself secretly pissing on items at the grocery store where she worked. After launching an investigation, police were able to identify the woman as 23-year-old Kelly Tedford. Through this, they were also able to determine that the store in question was the Monadnock Food Co-op, where she was an employee. Upon passing along the unfortunate and disgusting news to the store's management, the company estimated they incurred roughly $1,500 in costs between cleaning expenses and ruined products that Tedford is accused of contaminating. However, it's unclear if this figure also factors in a recall they were also forced to do because of the incident. The co-op reportedly issued an alert to customers, advising them they were recalling organic quinoa, cornmeal, polenta, coconut shreds, and raw walnuts, all items which Tedford presumably gave the golden shower treatment to as well. As if all of this weren't bad enough, apparently the 23-year-old's proclivities weren't limited to her place of employment. Police say they are still investigating Tedford's trove of videos, which appear to show her peeing on produce, surfaces, and other objects in a number of other locations in multiple communities. These videos allegedly date back as far as 2021. Tedford was arrested on February 21st and is currently facing a charge of criminal mischief. However, authorities have stated that more charges are possible as the investigation continues.
A pair of Brazilian travelers who were planning to go on vacation ended up with an unexpected layover in jail last week after they showed up to their flight late and were denied boarding and allegedly responded by attacking airport staff. The whole thing reportedly began shortly after 8:30 a.m. on March 2nd when the suspects, 40-year-old Rafael Sarafe Novaes and 29-year-old Beatriz Rapoport de Campos Maya, arrived at Florida's Miami International Airport. The engaged couple were expecting to board a flight to Cancun, Mexico, where they had booked a vacation. However, things did not go as planned. After showing up at the airport less than 25 minutes before their American Airlines flight was scheduled to take off, the pair were told that they were too late and that boarding had already finished. That's when the couple apparently flew into a violent rage. Footage shot by equally concerned and amused bystanders shows Novaes and Maya after they allegedly attempted to force their way onto the flight, pushing past airport staff and towards the jet bridge despite no trespassing signs and repeated verbal commands to stop. In the video, police and security can be seen struggling with both of them after they are accused of pushing at least 2 people and throwing coffee on them. After being restrained, Novias and Maya were arrested and could be seen in later footage being perp-walked in handcuffs to a waiting police car on the airport's tarmac. Much to the relief of all of the other passengers on the flight, they were successfully able to travel to Cancun afterwards, though they arrived there about half an hour late. Upon being taken into custody, the pair were both charged with 2 counts of battery and trespassing on property after warning. Novias was further charged with resisting arrest. Despite this, following their releases from jail, the couple remained defiant. During an interview with local media, they framed the situation as if they'd done nothing wrong, denying throwing the coffee and calling the airline employees liars. In Maya's telling of events, the coffee simply fell out of her hands. Even if this is true, if you ask me, the pair didn't exactly come off as sympathetic characters, especially when they started dropping lines like this.
I'm from Brazil. I'm from Brazil. I'm a doctor in Brazil. Like, what's supposed to happen? This is fair? Nobody threw coffee. Just the coffee fall. The coffee just fall. And the lady that said that I threw her coffee is a liar.
Following the incident, American Airlines put out a statement saying in part, quote, "Acts of violence are not tolerated by American Airlines, and we are committed to working closely with law enforcement in their investigation." Reports also point out that committing acts of intentional violence in an international airport is a federal crime, punishable by up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. A Texas man found out the hard way that it's not actually fun to literally be worth your weight in gold when he panicked after getting caught for a brazen jewelry store robbery, and he allegedly decided to swallow the evidence. The whole thing began on the afternoon of February 26th when the suspect, 32-year-old Jathan Gilder, walked into a Tiffany & Co. store in Orlando's Mall of Millennia. Upon entering, he told staff that he was a representative of an unspecified NBA player, and he was there to negotiate a large purchase. After being escorted to a private viewing room, Gilder was shown several pieces of diamond jewelry, among them a ring and 2 sets of earrings. All told, the items were worth nearly $1.4 million. However, as I'm sure you've already guessed, Gilder was not in fact there for legitimate reasons. He was posing as a rep for a high roller simply so that employees would be duped into bringing out the valuables. As they were in the middle of discussing a wire transfer, the 32-year-old suddenly got up from his seat, snatched all of the jewelry, and ran for the door. While the exit was locked and the employees quickly began to struggle with Gilder, he was nothing if not persistent. After reefing on one of the exit doors long enough, he was able to pry it open so there was enough room for him to escape. Employees managed to get the diamond ring back during the confrontation, but he still managed to make off with the 2 sets of earrings worth approximately $770,000. Unfortunately for Gilder though, thanks to the mall's extensive network of surveillance cameras, as well as public CCTV cameras, police were quickly able to identify the vehicle he was driving. He was pulled over about 6 hours later as he was speeding back to his home in Texas. While police looked in Gilder's SUV, they found plenty of evidence that he was the suspect they were looking for, including the clothes he was allegedly wearing during the robbery and the price tags for the stolen items. However, the actual jewelry was nowhere to be found. Well, authorities soon figured out why, when after being taken into custody, Gilder spontaneously asked, quote, "Am I going to be charged for what's in my stomach?" It turned out that Gilder had swallowed the earrings right before his arrest, something that was eventually confirmed with medical imaging. The decision was one the 32-year-old apparently came to quickly regret, as he was also allegedly overheard by another officer saying, quote, "I should have thrown them out the window." Gilder has now been charged with multiple offenses, including first-degree grand theft. According to news sources, this is far from his first foray into robbery. Included in his lengthy rap sheet is a nearly identical incident from 2022 where he allegedly robbed a Tiffany store in Houston. That time, he did not swallow the valuables though. Speaking of which, arguably the worst job of all is going to be for the person unlucky enough to have to retrieve the stolen diamonds. Police reports note, quote, "These foreign objects will need to be collected by cops after they are passed through Gilder's system."
Authorities in Gwinnett County, Georgia say that 3 young women are in custody and are facing charges following a bizarre and violent broad daylight brawl last month, one that was apparently over a prom dress. The whole thing unfolded back on February 26th at a racetrack station just outside the city of Norcross. According to reports, an 18-year-old woman who has not been identified by name had traveled there that afternoon to sell a prom dress to her now former friend, 20-year-old Morgan Flincham. It seems that the prom dress in question had quite the convoluted history. It said that Flincham was the original owner, but that the dress was in the 18-year-old's possession at the time and that her mother had partially paid for it. Apparently, the woman had arranged to meet with the understanding that Flincham would be buying the rest of the dress outright. After they both arrived at the gas station, Flincham asked if she could try the dress on in a business bathroom, to which the 18-year-old agreed. However, this was allegedly a setup. As soon as they went inside, a friend of Flincham's was waiting there who snatched the dress and bolted. The 18-year-old ran outside, only to discover that another one of Flincham's friends was waiting there. The situation would have been a 3-on-1 if it weren't for the fact that the teen brought her boyfriend with her. The boyfriend was apparently able to wrestle the prom dress away from the two accomplices. However, that didn't stop the girls from attacking the 18-year-old victim. Footage captured by the gas station's surveillance system shows a number of scuffles between the women, including one particularly wild moment when one of the suspects begins choking the teen victim from behind. As you can see, the exchange ended with the 18-year-old flipping her attacker over and body slamming her on the pavement. When police were called and arrived at the scene, all three of the female suspects were arrested. In addition to Flincham, the two other women have been identified as Lilia DeJager and Kaylee Georgia. All three of them have now been charged with theft by taking, while Flincham and DeJager are each facing an additional charge of battery. Following the arrests, a corporal with Gwinnett County Police said of the strange situation, quote, "I would say it's not normally something we have to investigate, an argument over a prom dress." However, the department reminded the public that they have designated areas at all of their precincts for transactions like these to make them safer for both buyers and sellers.
Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a 31-year-old Georgia man found himself facing charges this week after he attempted to use a police patrol car as his personal taxi service. According to an affidavit released this week, the whole thing began just after 10 p.m. on March 14th, when an officer with the St. Petersburg Police was temporarily stopped while on patrol near the intersection of North Shore Drive and 7th Avenue. It's unclear why exactly the officer was pulled over or what he was doing, but we do know that his emergency lights were on and flashing. We also know that he was not moonlighting as an Uber driver. However, this was apparently confusing for 31-year-old Andrew Davison, who walked up to the vehicle while the officer was inside, opened up one of the unlocked rear doors, and climbed in. After he did, Davison allegedly began demanding a ride home. Well, technically the officer did end up giving Davison a lift, but not to where he hoped. After observing signs that the 31-year-old was intoxicated, they instead drove him to jail, where he was charged with trespassing in an occupied structure. Davison was reportedly released the following evening after posting a $500 bond and presumably sleeping off the liquor. Representatives from Florida's Brevard County Sheriff's Office released what is perhaps some of the most classic Florida man footage we've seen in a while this week, after a local man was arrested while dressed in a Ronald McDonald costume. The clown takedown happened on the afternoon of March 24th when officers were called to a shopping center in the city of Palm Bay. Police were contacted after 40-year-old Christopher Marlowe reportedly caused a scene there and refused to leave the plaza. According to police, he had also previously been in trouble for trespassing there before. When officers arrived, they found Marlowe dressed in his Ronald McDonald costume. He had the iconic red and white striped shirt and yellow vest, though in place of the Golden Arches logo, there was apparently a skull instead. The 40-year-old did not take the news well when he was informed that he was being placed under arrest. He began resisting, and the whole thing quickly turned into a bit of a McDumpster fire.
Put your stuff down. Put your stuff down. Step it up. No, I'll sleep. On the ground. Get me now! Turn over now! Turn over now!
As you heard, before releasing the body camera footage this week, police took the time to cover Marlowe's profanity-laden ranting with comical honking noises. But that wasn't the only surreal part of this whole thing. In addition to finding a fake orange gun on Marlowe, a search of his bag revealed several additional clown costumes and a package of red noses. My personal favorite moment, though, was when one of the officers told the 40-year-old while putting him in the squad car, quote, "You look like a clown," only for Marlowe to reply, quote, "No shit, I am a clown, stupid." According to police, Marlowe has now been charged with trespassing and resisting an officer with violence. His previous rap sheet includes similar crimes, as well as a slew of drug-related offenses. Well, what can I say, folks? It's been a real Florida kind of week, and this last case is no exception. Authorities in the city of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, say that a 21-year-old man has been arrested and is facing charges this week after he allegedly drove his father's car into the ocean following an argument. The whole thing started shortly before 2 a.m. on March 26th when the Jacksonville Beach Police Department received a strange call from a man named John Cuss. The 60-year-old father said that his 21-year-old son Joshua had borrowed his gray Subaru the previous night, but had not returned it. He was pretty sure he knew where to find it, though. You see, Joshua had texted him a short time earlier. During that exchange, he had threatened, quote, "I'm going to drive the car into the Atlantic Ocean." By pinging the location of Joshua's cell phone, police were able to follow his movements from that night to a local beach. Sure enough, when they arrived, officers found the Subaru floating in the water just off the shoreline. Joshua was nowhere to be found, though using that same cell data, they were able to track him to his mother's place, who lived nearby. When confronted about what had happened, the 21-year-old apparently admitted to what he had done, calling it a, quote, "stupid move." He then explained to officers that he was mad because of an argument he'd had with his dad and his aunt earlier that night. A subsequent police report states that Joshua told the officers he initially tried to get the car to drive itself into the ocean using a cinder block, but he was unable to make the setup work. He then did it himself, but claimed he was careful to make sure no one was nearby or in the water before he accelerated. He added that while he was driving, he, quote, "wished he could point his middle finger at his father and aunt," stating, quote, "hopefully they will listen to me now." Unfortunately for Joshua, that seems unlikely, as his dad has already decided to press charges. Joshua was arrested on felony criminal mischief after it was determined he'd done at least $6,500 worth of damage to his father's car. Apparently, this is also not the first time Joshua has done something stupid behind the wheel. In January of 2022, he pleaded no contest to DUI and was handed a 12-month probation sentence. In that case, he was also driving one of his dad's cars. At the sentencing, John Cuss wrote in a letter to the judge, quote, "Joshua has a lot of work ahead of him, and I can only hope that he learns from his mistake and turns it into a good life lesson." Well, it looks like the only thing aging worse than that statement is going to be John Cuss's car after the salt water rusts out the underside of his Subaru. A Tennessee fugitive apparently became the latest poster child for the phrase "f around, find out" this week after he issued a foolish challenge to police while on the run, and it turned out that they were more than happy to accept. According to a Facebook update put out by the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, it all started when the fugitive in question, Devin Bart, began posting to his TikTok account. The 25-year-old was wanted in connection with a domestic-related assault case. In the incident, he allegedly went to the place where his ex-girlfriend worked, swore at her repeatedly, stole her wallet, threw her debit card down a storm gutter, and took the keys to her rental car. Rather than taking the situation seriously, though, Bart decided to taunt police. In uploaded photos and videos to his account, he stated that, quote, if he was going to jail, the authorities would have to find him first. He also reportedly challenged police to try and locate him. Well, it seems that's exactly what they did, because on April 4th, Bart was quickly found and placed under arrest. The whole thing apparently went smoothly, and the 25-year-old was booked into the county jail. In the department's Facebook post this week, Chief Deputy Anthony Buckner stated in part, quote, "We take all warrants and the law very seriously at the Sheriff's Office. Evading deputies is not a game. Ignoring the law has serious consequences." A Florida woman's colossal meltdown has resulted in both internet infamy and serious charges this week after she allegedly held 2 teen boys at gunpoint while they were fishing near her property. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime on the evening of March 28th when the Brevard County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call from Donna Elkins. The 59-year-old told dispatchers that she had caught and was holding 2 young boys who she claimed were fishing in the backyard of her home in the city of Melbourne. She stated that she had petrified them and, quote, stopped them, and they were laying on the ground. While Elkins certainly had terrified the boys, it seems that she declined to share other important details. For starters, that she was holding the boys, ages 15 and 13, at gunpoint. The weapon in question was a pellet gun, but the teens certainly didn't know that. More importantly, though, it turned out that the boys were not, in fact, on Elkins' property. They were fishing in a pond on a peninsula at least 30 feet away from her property line. Interviews given by one of the two young victims, 15-year-old Braden, has shed further light on the disturbing situation. While speaking with a local news outlet, he told reporters how Elkins immediately freaked out upon finding him and his friend outside. In addition to forcing them to lie on the ground, he said that she threatened to blow their heads off. Braden took a video during the harrowing incident, which appears to perfectly capture just how unhinged the whole thing was. Let's take a look.
Do you get people in your backyard?
Sometimes, ma'am.
That's definitely sad. Because if someone goes in your backyard, you can blow their fucking heads off. I have a right to protect my property and my house. So you ain't coming back. Ever. What's your name?
It seems that even Elkins' husband realized that this was not a good look, because later in that same video he can be seen briefly coming outside and taking the pellet gun from her. When police arrived, they evidently felt the same way, because it was Elkins who ended up under arrest. The 59-year-old has now been charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault and 2 counts of false imprisonment. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a woman is facing charges this week following a bizarre domestic violence incident in which she allegedly weaponized a seashell. The whole thing reportedly began at around 11:30 a.m. on March 29th, when the woman in question, 40-year-old Nikki Quarterman, was at her on-again, off-again boyfriend's place in the city of St. Petersburg. The pair have apparently been in a tumultuous relationship for over 10 years, a fact that will make more sense in just a second. According to police, the trouble started that morning when Quarterman, who was allegedly quite intoxicated, got into an argument with the 63-year-old victim. That argument apparently ended with Quarterman taking her clothes off and proceeding to smash anything and everything she could get her hands on. The 63-year-old boyfriend managed to get Quarterman outside. However, her rage-filled freakout still reportedly wasn't over. That's when she allegedly grabbed a 10 to 12-inch conch shell that was covered in barnacles and began using it to try and attack the male victim. After taking several swings, she threw the seashell at him, causing a laceration to his hand. She then locked herself in the garage and refused to come out. When police arrived, they were able to get in there, though, and place her under arrest after a brief struggle. While all of this is quite unhinged, it's apparently par for the course for the 40-year-old. Police say that she has multiple convictions for disorderly intoxication, battery, DUI, and assault on law enforcement officers. And just 6 months ago, she was arrested for a different incident involving the same male victim. In that instance, she allegedly ran from the man's house topless and began banging on the doors of several of his neighbors while screaming profanities. Following her arrest this week, Quarterman was charged with felony battery. She was released from custody after posting $15,000 bond and was ordered to have no contact with the 63-year-old victim. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.